Well, if you had to give one simple reason people should love wine without any fancy language, what would you say?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's delicious, but I just because it's so unique, like you'll never get the same thing twice. You get to have so much fun with it, and you get to just enjoy it with your friends. That's the whole point of it is, being able to explore flavor profiles and food pairing is so fun, right? Understanding salt, fat, acid, heat, and then how do I find a wine that goes into that niche? Like, am I looking for acid? Am I looking for more weight? Am I looking for sugar? To me, that is the fun part of it. Like, fall into it because you're a really curious person that loves to eat and drink. And how can I do it the best way possible?
Welcome, everyone, to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I am your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do? And I'm going to turn off that screen on.
Yeah, so my name is Serena Harkey. I'm the Food and Beverage Director for the Cowboys Club in Frisco, Texas. It's a mind-blowing, amazing career, having come from food and beverage basically my entire life. To be able to align that with such an insane organization like the Dallas Cowboys, it became a career that I didn't think that I could even dream of.
That's
So
awesome.
it's really amazing to have that alignment, and to be able to kind of fuel those two passions together is pretty incredible every day.
That's awesome. And it's interesting because one of the things that I was looking at this list of it was like interesting because it showed regions of the world and what alcohol people prefer in different regions.
Yes.
And it's actually painful for me because I'm in Asia, which is not a wine region per se. People have wine here and enjoy wine. But I wish at times that I was in a region that had more wine. And so it's fun like that. But I mean, there's still great stuff that I can get a hold of. But like, talk to me about where you're at. What's the wine culture like there near you?
Yeah. So I spent the last 10 years in the Bay Area. So I came from a really diversive wine culture background where people are interested in wines that are such more esoteric and intriguing and, orange wine and Rieslings, and people were willing to have a lot more fun and explore. And coming to Texas, I would say it's not that people aren't curious, but there definitely is kind of a standard where people really do love, the tried and true Napa Cabernet, Bordeaux. People are exploring Casa Robles quite a bit more.
Nice.
A lot more chilled red wine drinkers here, which I was not my norm, but I'm now even realizing is becoming a norm in the world. So Texas, I'm going to say trendsetters there.
I love that. I love it.
Yes.
If we can, I love it when you get trendsetters because they're people that are willing to mix things up. I'm generally a pretty traditional, and with my coffee and things like that. And there's this trend, like in Vietnam, of egg coffee and salt coffee. And I was like, "What is this egg coffee?" And I was like, "This is impossible. This is evil. This is not right. Should never be." And I drank it. I was like, "Dear goodness gracious, that is amazing." It is the flavor egg coffee, right? I didn't think it's so wild. And they whip up an egg, so it's kind of got this eggnoggy vibe to it, and it's just frothy and lovely and very, very umami flavors. It's wild.
I can imagine it being very creamy and silky in texture.
It is. And
so cool.
It's very different. And but the thing is it's like you have to have people that are willing to try things that kind of expand the box, but I don't know. It's interesting to see how that affects the wine community. What do you see as trends that you see emerging in the wine?
So I definitely see chilled red wine. That is actually really going to be a thing, but I don't think that it's that new either, right? Beaujolais all day long, chilled red wine, but seeing it a lot more with bigger style of wine drinkers. So chilled Napa Cab, I'm loving it. Like, great. I'm here for it. So I think chilled red wine is definitely going to be a thing. I do think esoteric is dropping off a little bit. Like, I think orange wine, that phase maybe kind of fading out. But outside of that, I think maybe I'm just like too passionate about it. But like, I still stand by Riesling, still like being a thing. It's not fading out anytime soon.
I love that. Well, I want to start simple. Like, why, going back a bit, why do you love wine? Like, how did you get into this? It doesn't, not even professionally, but like personally, what got you started down this path?
So, my like very first job was a barbecue restaurant, and
That
I
sounds rad.
obviously, yeah, it was awesome. Cow print button downs, choreographed dances. It was like Disneyland, but for barbecue. It was awesome.
I can envision it, and it sounds awesome.
It was awesome. It was the place to work in high school. Big Bubba's Bad Barbecue. However, when I was
Hang
19
on,
years
hang
old,
on. The name
yes,
was Big Bubba's Bad Barbecue.
Big Bubba's Bad Barbecue.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
I loved it. Like, I will say, I worked there for 9 years because I loved it and the people that I worked with so much that I couldn't leave. So I was doing French fine dining and Big Bubba's Bad Barbecue at the same time,
That's
just
awesome.
because it was such a great place to work. But when I was 19 years old, my sister and I got a job at this little boutique wine store in Paso Robles. And obviously, I'm 19 years old, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. And the owner was amazing. Her name's Jan Manny, and she just completely took me under her wing because I was just asking a ton of questions because I didn't know anything, but I also, from a young server perspective, was looking at the price point of what I'm selling and thinking I could make a lot of money if I know how to talk about this.
Mm.
So that's where I just initially dove into it. But it was the understanding and just being so impressed by this is an agriculture product. Like, it's something that is boots on the ground, very, raw, dirty. People work so hard night and day to create this product and it become this luxury
Mhm.
product. So I was just really curious about that whole process and just kind of blown out, like taking something that's just so raw and so dirty, and people just see that end result of what's in the bottle and being worth hundreds to thousands of dollars. To me, was so insane. And then wanting to understand the different. Well, why is this a box wine, and why is this $10,000 for this one bottle? It just, made me incredibly curious. And then I was very fortunate to grow up in Paso Robles. So then I got to know these winemakers and these owners and understand their background, and having the connection to the people that made the product was incredibly, I would say, like lucky. Like, I feel spoiled growing up in my career there.
That's awesome. I I love that. I love that question of what makes a box wine versus what makes
Uh-huh.
a $10,000 wine too. Because one of the things too, I last couple years ago, I took some leather making classes, and I love doing stuff fun with my hands. I actually made this wallet. I made this wallet the other day, and I love it.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I made my own wallet. My daughter made keychains because I took her to classes with me, and she had made her own wallet. We went back and made her a wallet, and it was like this big, nice, cool thing, and she's carrying it around and putting money in it. I love it.
So awesome.
Right? But one of the things too is like, I got started on this path a couple years ago because my wife was joking with me that she wanted an expensive bag. She's like, I want a Birkin bag. And I was like, yeah, good luck. It's a lot of things that people,
we all want a Birkin.
right? But I looked up and I was like, all right, well, maybe I can save up for this. And I looked up the prices of Birkin bags and I was like, all right, that's going to take me a bit of time.
Yeah. Because to even be eligible to buy the one Birkin, you're not saving up for the Birkin. You got to buy a lot more before you can even maybe get a Birkin.
Right?
It's wild.
It's wild with that. But I found that's so true. I found someone who trained in Hermes. He trained with the Hermes people to make bags. He trained in Paris and he lives here in Vietnam and he makes his own bags now. And I met him and I was like, can you teach me to make stuff? And he's like, yeah, what do you want to make? I was like, Birkin bag? He's like, that's too hard. I was like, a Tiffany bag? And so I made my wife a Tiffany bag. It was
That is so cool.
about 20 classes. I went there for 20 different days for 4 hours each day. And I learned why this wallet I have is much less expensive than that other. And it was just the craftsmanship, the level, the steps that it took, even to create the handle. The number of times I made a mistake, the different tools, the specialty tools you need, the special, like cutting out the leather, like the basic first cut of all of the leather is so hard, and it's like this very expensive leather. And I was like, I looked at him and I was like, and he's like, this is the spot on your piece of leather that you can use. And I was like, what happens if I mess up? And he's like, how much money do you have? I was like, oh, it's one of those types of situations. And I was like, okay, guess I am not going to mess up. And I had to be very, very careful. And he had me practice on other stuff. Like I practiced for 4 classes just cutting leather before he let me anywhere near anything that was actually going to be used. And it was just wild, the technique and the style. And when I finished, after all those classes, I look back at it and I still look at it. And my wife has had many purses that have come and gone and they fall apart and get destroyed. Not that one. That purse just endures. And it's been almost 8 years now. I made it before, 7 years now. I made it 7 years ago and she uses it all the time. And she's had other purses that she bought and she used them for a year and a half and they were just gone, fall apart, things broke. Not that one. It lasts. And there's something to be, and when I sit there and think about that and I apply that over to wine, it's the craft, it's the little things, it's the people and that bag was so awesome because of Laum, the guy I studied with. But Laum went and studied with these master artisans in Paris, and then they studied with, and there's this tradition that's also part of it. But until you start getting into this, it's hard to understand that.
Totally. But that is beautiful. Like I can only think like your wife probably just looks at that bag every day and has a whole level of appreciation for it that a Birkin will never come close to.
That's what I said. I told her that the other people that have my wife's a celebrity singer in Vietnam and all these ladies were like flexing, like, I've got this bag. And they're like, it's one of like 200. And I looked at my wife, I was like, yours is one of one. Because I'm not doing that again. That was really hard. It's really hard. So,
but you could if you wanted to.
But I could if I wanted to. I have to repair this. Here's like one of the little like Lucky Charm pieces of it. So
that's so you could just keep making her the Hermes like trinkets.
Yep, 100%. 100%. But I wanted to ask you this because like it reminds me of wine, but there's something for everyone. And like I like the wallet that I have. It's more low key. It did not take me 20 days, but there's a wine for everyone,
Totally.
And talk to me about how people can go about finding the wine for them.
I think it's asking a ton of questions. It's understanding what your palate is. Like to me, it's, build your foundation, start inexpensive, right? And understand the flavor profiles, the textures that you look for. I think about when I'm working the floor as a som, like I'm asking, what do you like? And I'm not thinking about price points. I'm not thinking about winery names or anything like that. I'm not thinking about brand recognition. I'm thinking about what does this person actually enjoy? And then that Rolodex it's
Mm,
the flavor profile Rolodex that's working in my head of what's on the menu to understand this is what they will actually enjoy. And then the favorite, all time favorite, is when they say, like, it's always this, I hate Chardonnay. Tell me why you hate Chardonnay. And then I'm going to find you a short, you're going to learn that you actually can love Chardonnay. It's just all about the right one. So I think, being curious and exploring, starting entry level and taking the time to just understand flavor profile is everything because that's how you learn to work your way up strategically and it's too easy to blow too much money on something you won't enjoy and life's too short.
right. I love that. And I think that, it is about that experience of just getting to know things, of experiencing them, of trying them out. I remember some of my early wine experiences. I didn't know what I was getting. And I was just like, we are going to buy this and it's red. And we're going to take it home. And we tasted it. And it's like, this one is good. And I took another bottle home. This one is not. Then I was trying to figure out why. And it was like, well, it has this thing that makes my mouth feel funny and dry. And I
Mhm.
was like, my friend's like, all right, well, that might be this, and or what is, and it's like one of the things too was like it was so helpful for me that I had a friend who was a self-proclaimed wine snob, and yet he was, trained trained himself just by drinking a lot of wine. And what was interesting is that, luckily I grew up in the Napa Valley too. So it was like I got to be around
Mhm.
my friend who's just
We're
trained himself.
spoiled, yeah.
Yeah, he was like, we were able to go and see things. But one of the things that was like awesome was like I love that you too that you're talking about like the wine industry is full of like farmers, and it seems super fancy now, but really it's like
It's not.
it's not. It's this down to earth
Uh-huh.
industry that has these layers of things on top. And one of the things that for me was so wonderful about growing up in Napa and when I moved there, in high school, got to see why it's not intimidating. And I think that's one of the challenges for people.
Uh-huh.
Wine feels intimidating because there's a lot of fancy names. You don't get that with beer.
Yes.
You don't get all of these fancy names that like leave you feeling like overwhelmed. Like if you pronounce it wrong, you're going to be embarrassing yourself. But wine does have that sometimes.
Totally. As it really is this perception of a luxury good.
Yeah.
And it has every right to be that. When you think of the time and energy, literally blood, sweat, and tears that go into making it, it's down and dirty. It is farming.
Yeah. And I love it too because it doesn't have to be intimidating. There's a lot that goes into it. But, if you want to learn, there are people out there that would be happy to help you, happy to kind of steer you down that path.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing too. Is it's not a journey that you take on your own, and
Yeah.
there's so much to miss. I think with studying, like if somebody's diving into actually studying wine, you have to talk about it. You have to join tasting groups. You have to get out and explore. And the like hard part of that too is especially if you're going out and talking to winemakers, you're going to hear so many conflicting stories and so many
Right.
conflicting reasons why, because everybody's decision making process is different. But that's also the beautiful thing about it is when we talk Napa specifically, like we're going to talk about Cabernet from, oh gosh, it's name of vineyard, from, let's say, Spring Mountain, right?
Okay.
Napa from, or Cabernet from Spring Mountain, but this guy's making it and this guy's making it, and they're two completely different wines in that bottle. However, if you become a tried and true like actual taster, you will taste those two different wines and know exactly where it comes from because they're still going to embody this sense of place. And that's so magical. But then you dive into, why do these two wines, same grape from the same vineyard, same soil, same climate, how are they tasting completely differently at the same time? It's amazing. Like, you have to be curious or else you'll be frustrated. And even then, it can be frustrating, but it's so fun. And you have to do it with others. You have to talk about it constantly.
I remember once went somewhere and I had met this guy, and he and I had this conversation with him. And then afterwards, he's like, dude, you just feel so familiar. Like, I feel like I know you for some reason. And then suddenly I was like, well, we started talking, and suddenly he realized he knew my brother. And he hadn't placed, he's like, dude, I should have placed the name. You guys have the same name, like same family name. And I was like, yeah, but he's like, but it's not that. You reminded me wasn't the look. It was just this vibe. You guys have this similar vibe, And it's interesting because we grew up, of any of the people in the world, only my brother and I have the most similar shared experiences, and they separated at a point. Now we're very different individuals because we went on to live our separate lives. But up to a certain point, we had these same shared experiences. But then life kind of happens. And that's the kind of the beauty of wine. Like, I lived just outside of St. Helena, up in the mountains, which is the Howell Mountain area. I lived up in that Howell Mountain area, and it's interesting because it's so different from this other region, and you see it in the people, but like the wine and the soil has that difference as well. It's just so interesting and fascinating how you can have two things, but there's also this same that are so different, but also this similar characteristic underneath. So I won't geek out right now.
But it's so easy to do.
Right?
Yes.
Do you remember the first time a wine really clicked for you, where you thought like, oh, okay, I get it? Talk to me about that.
Yes. And it wasn't anything crazy expensive, but it was Michel Chapoutier Belle Rouge. And it was, still fairly entry-level wine, it had balance. And that was where I finally, it clicked for me, flavor, acid, tannin, was all kind of integrating and coming in. It was the first time where I wasn't just tasting, because I was I didn't get it at that point. What Pinot tablet, and all so confusing, and this one's light and this one's really astringent, and going through that process. And it was the first time it really clicked, oh, okay.
Right.
This is all coming together very seamlessly. But I was also I was lucky to start my wine journey with intention.
Yeah.
Because I was intentionally studying and trying to understand it. But that was the first wine where it really clicked. And what was great about it in that moment, too, when it clicked, is I wasn't studying. It was one of the first times where I was I'm just actually going to sit and enjoy a glass of wine. And then I was oh, hello, let's open up another bottle. I get this.
I had, there was an interesting thing. I know what you're talking about. I remember, I honestly have not really been a cab person, but last month I had the most balanced, awesome cab that I've ever had. It was just all of these different things at the same time. And it just spoke to me. And I have not had a cab speak to me in a long time. And it was just it's interesting because I think that's something that's so fascinating to me, because it's not something that happens with other spirit. I mean, maybe cocktails, that you get a cocktail that just hits it, connects. But, I think that one of the things that's interesting to me is that, sometimes I'll try a wine and I'll just be I love my wine, but there are sometimes wines that you just that right there. That's special in a special way.
Yes. And I think even on the other side of that, it's something that I do quite often and I have to remind myself of, is, and I won't name names, but like I'll see like a producer in a vineyard and I go, no, like, don't like it, don't like it. And then I have to remind myself, you know what? It's been 5 years since you've had that. And you have to like remind yourself that, these producers and these vineyards are constantly evolving. It's not
Yeah.
going to be, unless it's, a lower level wine where it's meant to taste the same year after year, but there's so much evolution and it's not the same wine 5 years down the road, right? They're not making it, they may be making it in the same style, but what Mother Nature is giving them is completely different. And so I even have to remind myself, don't always knock it. Go back and retry it. Maybe they hired a different winemaker. Maybe they're farming differently. Maybe it's just a better vintage than that one that you had 5 years ago and were turned off by. So I do have to also go back and try wines that I did not like previously to see if anything has
Mm.
changed too.
It's very much this present moment. I love that about wine is I actually don't drink a lot, but when I do, I try to be super intentional about what I'm experiencing and just be super present because I've had the opposite happen as well. Like wines that were really good once, and I was like, I have to go back and get that wine, and I go buy it a second time, and that bottle just doesn't impress me the way this other one did, and it's fascinating for that. So it's just like I feel, I feel like a little bit of it is like it's like those scratcher tickets that you get, and you're like, all right, let's see what we're gonna get, And so there's always a surprise with that, and I love that part.
Oh yes, and that that can also be so disappointing. And I
Right.
remember I was, gosh, was it last year? I think, or the year before? I was in Bordeaux for En Premiere, and again, I won't.
Nice,
Yeah, it was. Oh, like I swear,
nice
once in a
subtle
lifetime
flex right there.
experience. If anybody wants to invite me back, I'll be there. But no, it was a mind blowing experience. But there was, one chateau that I was so excited to go to, like one of my absolute favorites. And it was the most disappointing tasting
Oh,
that I had the entire trip. And I'm not joking, I was mad. It was like, you have got to be like, this is the one that I was looking forward to. And it just didn't deliver. And it is such a great reminder of vintage matters.
yeah.
Vintage matters so, so much. And producers that I did not think that I was going to be blown away by, they also told me things that they were doing differently and was so impressed. It was a very cool experience. But yeah, wine is evolving constantly.
I
The
love
way
that.
people farm, the way they make the wine, the barrels, just everything matters.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually one of the things that keeps me interested and excited
Mhm.
about wine after all these years. It's like because it's always changing. You don't
Mhm.
see areas that are so traditional, have such long traditions and have been doing things the same way for thousands of years, but then suddenly are like, now we're going to innovate, and it's beautiful like that.
Yes. You will never know everything in this industry. It is impossible.
What keeps you excited after years in the industry?
Mhm. I think for me, so much of it has to do with, honestly, people, the relationships. Like I love, I'm just a very curious person. So I love getting to meet winemakers and understanding their decision making process, especially in the vineyard. To me, that's probably the most fascinating and understanding how they look at terroir you know, and soil, all of these things. That to me it is so fascinating. The people behind it, to me, that's the big connection. Um, and I think about that with specifically with my job now. I could care less about football, but now, like, I know some of these players, I know those coaches, and I'm watching that game and I'm like, come on, brother. Like, and it's again, it's that connection that you have to something that makes all of the difference. So, tasting wines and talking about them and having an additional connection, knowing who's behind it, to me, like, that is the most exciting thing.
Yeah, it is something when you have that. And one of the things, like, I know a lot of the marketing, that goes in the wine, like every bottle's a story, but people don't realize every bottle is a story. Like
So true.
there is so much going on to each and every one of the bottles, and it's like that's one of the things that separates out wine for me so much. And I'm not throwing any shade at craft cocktails or beer or anything, but like when a beer maker is making the beer, they're aiming for the standard of
Mhm.
like keeping things the same. Every
Yes,
year they
all
want
about
it to be.
consistency.
Yeah, they really want the consistency, but with wine, there is this. I wouldn't say flair, but a little bit, that people have that creativity. I mean, obviously, they want to make sure that a Pinot tastes like a Pinot,
Mhm.
but where do you take that Pinot? How do
Mhm.
you draw it out? How do you play with it? Same thing
Yeah.
for a Cab or Merlot.
I think the other piece to that too is like appreciating what Mother Nature provided you.
Yeah,
There's only so much control you can have in the vineyard. You can take so many preventative measures to protect against wind and sun and birds and all of these things, but you can't fight rain. You can't fight the
yeah,
sun. There's only so much that you can do. And trying to, I think, respect that and embody like what this is what Mother Nature just gave us this year. But also still find that balance of being true to your brand. And like, our consumers have an expectation of what to get from us. And, there's a really beautiful dance, a beautiful balance there. So I love, the idea of what respecting Mother Nature gives you, and
I love that.
talking to winemakers that really believe that and are passionate about it.
And I love that, and I think that the winemakers that I've been interviewing are some of the most cool people I've met, and
Mhm.
they are always talking about there's this balance between what they want and what the
Mhm.
wine wants and what nature wants, and it's like those things are not always aligning, but they have to sit there and just figure out how to shape it, but
Mhm.
not be intrusive. So like we're
Mhm.
going to shape how this wine grows, we're going to shape its development, but at the same time it wants certain things.
Mhm. And it's going to push back.
It is. It was going to push back, and they have to sit there. I had a winemaker on last night, and she was like, "It's like having a teenage kid. You really want it to go a certain way, but it's going to be like, I don't want to, mom." And you still have to balance that and work with it and go,
Mhm.
"All right, I know you don't want to, but we're going to get you there. We're going
We're
to
gonna,
help get you
yes,
there."
yeah, gentle nudges.
Right.
Yes.
Gentle. Um,
Please.
someone getting into wine new, if they only drink, if they needed a starter, like a starter wine, what do you think are some of the easiest gateway varietals to get people into the world of wine?
Rosé, just rosé, just so easy drinking, so approachable. It's very hard to find rosés that, aren't for everyone, right? So I think rosé is probably like my go-to gateway drug when it comes to wine. Rosé, and then if we're going to be a little bit more complex and have more fun, there's champagne, like or just the entire world of sparkling, right? Understanding what's the difference between prosecco, cava, champagne, like that is the ultimate test of like price comparison and understanding like why a prosecco is so much different than a champagne and why am I paying so much more on the difference. So I always think that that is a great if you're going to analyze wine in that light, I think that's a great place to start is the world of sparkling. But if
Mm,
you're going into it for pleasure, for enjoyment, I say kick off with rosé all day long.
I love that. Rosé is so easy. It's just so mellow. It's so forgiving. I've very rarely had a rosé that wasn't just fun and surprising in some way.
And it should be fun. Like
Right?
this at the end of the day, it should all be fun. It can be so serious and studying is so like I'm just like sweating taking tests and it's 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 hard and life's hard enough, but this should be fun. When you think about the overall purpose of what wine is, it's meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to be pleasurable and, you know, comforting, all of these things. And if it ain't that, then you shouldn't do anything that ain't that.
Right. If it's not fun, like, what are you even doing at that point in time? Because,
Mhm.
it should be. And it's like, I think that that's one of the things people forget. Like, the wine experience is an experience that's meant to be shared, it's meant to be enjoyed.
Yes.
And there's no wrong way to do it. Like, I'm sure there are ways that bring out the flavor of the wine more. I remember once we went out to, my friends and I were in college and we took a bottle of wine with us. We went out and had Korean barbecue. And someone was like, "You can't do Korean barbecue and wine." And we're like, "Why not,
Watch
dude?
me.
Watch
Yeah.
me. Watch me."
Watch me.
Exactly. Watch me. And it was like great. And then the other day I was out having some Vietnamese pork chop with it's gum sung, and it's just so delicious. And I was like sitting there going, and one of my friends was visiting. He's like, "What wine should we have with this?" And I was like, "Dude, don't know, but like, let's try
Let's
out some
find
different
out.
things. Let's find out. Let's figure out what works." And it was wild because these were not traditional foods, what wine goes with, because one of the things we were in fish sauce, what pairs with fish sauce? It's so aromatic. It's so pungent, what can you mix with that? And it was like, we kind of tried out a couple things, and you know what actually worked for us? It was a Shiraz, some Australian Shiraz, man. And it
Fun.
worked. It worked well. It was wild, peppery, and it just
Mhm.
paired with the food.
I love that. And you get so much fruit coming through on that. Oh, that would be so good.
Right? It was
Yeah.
fun. It was fun, but it took us throwing all of the books and the learning out the
Yeah.
window. We're like, dude, no one's been pairing fish sauce and wine before, so let's figure out what we can do.
Yes. I know what I'm doing when I get to work, pulling out some fish sauce and Shiraz and gonna figure this out. That's
You're gonna try
awesome.
it. You got to
Yes.
try it. It's wild. All right, well, let me ask you this: what are your personal go-to wine styles or grapes when you're off the clock? You're just
Mhm.
home doing your thing. What do you go to?
So my go-tos is champagne. I am a tried and true champagne girl. That's my happy place.
Bubbles.
Bubbles just, bring the joy. So I'm a big bubbles girl.
I can't think of anything else, but every time I start talking about champagne
Mhm.
bubbles, I just think of Finding Nemo, the character that's staring at the bubbles. That's me when I get champagne.
That's
I'm like,
me.
bubbles!
Yes.
Because everyone
Pop the
loves
bottle,
bubbles.
and I'm gonna do that the next time I open a bottle too. I'm just gonna go bubbles.
Do it. Do it.
I'll send you a video.
I'd love it. I would
Yes.
love to go into a super high-end fine dining restaurant and have the champagne be popped and the person scream bubbles.
Yes.
That would be my favorite experience.
So many clutched pearls in that moment. I can imagine. But if
Why
I'm not drinking champagne, like I would say varietally, I'm drinking Pinot.
I'm a
But
big fan of Pinot.
it's one of those things where it's so complex too. Pinot from Santa Barbara versus Burgundy and Carneros. It's all so unique and so different. So even then, it's what am I in the mood for there?
Yeah.
So it hits so many spots. But I love acid. I love that, it's lighter in style. It's not overwhelming. I can easily go for a second or third glass and, just not feel weighed down or tired by it. So I feel like in our world, basic, I'm like champagne Pinot. Just such a basic answer, but they're
No.
they're good for a reason.
Yeah, I love that. And and it's personal too. I think everyone has the reason that they're going for it. I had one person who came on recently and I asked that question and they were like, they were a big Italian wine fan. And I was like,
Mhm.
why? And when they said, well, I grew up and my grandma was Italian and we always had the Italian varietals on the table. It was table wine. We had it there. It was going with food all the time.
Yes.
And it was interesting. And they're like, so now when I have that flavor, it might not be the greatest wine, but that flavor
Mhm.
means home.
Yes, it's comfort.
It's comfort. It is that thing that But let me ask you this now, because, since you're going to go try my Shiraz and fish sauce in a bit, but what's a food and wine pairing that never fails to make you happy?
Oh, Riesling and triple cream brie with honey. Like that's my favorite snack. It's a really beautiful triple creme, some honey, some bread. Oh, and a nice Riesling. Yes.
Oh, that's power. That's that's awesome. Well, let me ask you this one. Is there an underrated wine region or style that you wish more people knew about? Some place or wine that you think, all right, people need to be giving this more love?
I think that it was a fad for a really long time. And I think that, you know, Tenfold did an amazing job of putting Australia on the map. But there are some really cool small producers out of Australia that are making wines that are also, there was that really big bold phase for so long, that there's a lot more balance coming out of Australia. So I would go there.
Yeah, I've got a bottle of Australian wine right down under my table that
Hmm.
I'm popping open
You know what's
tomorrow
up,
for.
Sean?
Yeah, yeah. I love. It's an Australian blend. It's super balanced as well, man. I think because living in Asia, we get a lot of Australian wines, and that's something that Californians don't get as much of. But man, they're doing some things right. But you're right. They do have some of those really like you're like, whoa, this is
Hmm.
wild. But
Blown away by
really,
it.
lately it's been super balanced. So I'm
Hmm.
with you on that.
Yes.
What is a varietal that you love to hate?
Ooh, I have never been asked that. That is a good question. Love to hate. And it's also because I'm from Paso Robles, Zinfandel.
Why? Talk to me about it.
It's again going to that like inconsistency where like you can be awesome or you can taste like prunes. Like
Mm.
it's so different. It gets so overripe, so saturated. And yeah, it would be Zinfandel. Like great ones are great, but man, it can suck.
I've had some
Zinfandel
bad
can just
Zen too,
suck
so I know what you're
sometimes.
talking about. I've
Yes.
had some that are just like a home
Whoops.
run, and I've had some that are like strikeout.
Yes.
All right.
Totally inconsistent in like the worst ways.
Well, if you had to give one simple reason people should love wine without any fancy language, what would you say?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it's delicious. But I just because it's so unique, like you'll never get the same thing twice. You get to have so much fun with it and you get to just enjoy it with your friends. That's the whole point of it is, being able to explore flavor profiles and food pairing is so fun, right? Understanding salt, fat, acid, heat, and then how do I find a wine that goes into that niche? Like, am I looking for acid? Am I looking for more weight? Am I looking for sugar? To me, that is the fun part of it. Like, fall into it because you're a really curious person that loves to eat and drink. And how can I do it the best way possible?
I love that. I love that. Well, I want to say thank you. That was all the questions I had. But where can people find out more about you and what you
Mhm.
do?
You can Google me. Um, yes, yes. Um, so great question, but in the sense that like I am now in a unique experience where I'm not as accessible as I was in my past restaurant life, where now I'm working for a private social club. So you can reach out to me via LinkedIn or Instagram, but I'm in a four-wall space, but it's one of the things of beauty where people can't just walk in and come in and you know see Serena. And that's a fun part of what I do is like actually enjoy the exclusivity of the space that I'm in, and I enjoy that for our members. It's very cool. So I'm not accessible in that way anymore, but absolutely accessible via LinkedIn, Instagram, very easy to find, and love connecting with people, especially love connecting with those in the industry or who are trying to grow and learn in it and want to get to that next level and understand how to really make a career out of it. I think that's something that I'm very passionate about, is finding people who want to be more than a som who just like enjoys drinking wine. And, I think you can go kid in a candy store very easily. But, this is somebody's business. And how do I make this a really successful business? How do I take this program and take it to the next level, not just because it's something that I like, but because I'm smart and strategic. So I anybody who wants to reach out and talk about that, like, I'm here for that all day long, nurturing a program to be successful and finding those who are really, passionate about that and being successful in that. I'd love to support that.